On this episode of the next 24 hours, we're going to be learning about how to create amazing experiences for your customers, amazing environments for your employees to work, and we're going to be covering topics like baseball, 18-wheel semis, the opera, American Idol, real leadership. All of these things all have to come together in an amazing way in order for you to sell a brand that most people don't think they like. If only we had an expert on that, and we do. His name is Chris Milligan. Chris Milligan was the executive in charge of all things marketing for years at the Cincinnati Opera. He is now the new CEO. Let's welcome him back to the show, Chris Milligan. Welcome to the next 24 hours, where I'm going to give you real information you can really use to transform your life and work one day at a time. I'll be your host, Curtis Zimmerman. Wow, I am so excited that you are here today. Why? Because we had an amazing interview with an amazing gentleman. His name is Chris Milligan, and Chris Milligan is the CEO at the Cincinnati Opera, and he's also a kind of a guru when it comes to marketing, advertising, leadership. Known him for many years. There was so much content, we decided to invite him back onto the program. He's here in studio today. So excited to have you back on the show, Chris. Welcome to the next 24 hours. How are you, my friend?
Thanks, Curtis. Good to be here. My pleasure.
I so much appreciated the feedback we've gotten from our last podcast together and the time that you painted pictures and really told our story. But now I wanted to focus today's episode more on your story and more on your leadership style and who you are in the professional world. We kind of delved into a little bit of who we are as friends, but now I want to go the next level. So my first question for you is, we like to ask people, what's a day in the life? So when we talk about the next 24 hours, that's based on what we did yesterday in 24 hours and last week in 24 hours. And all of those build on each other, creating the person we see in the mirror every day. So if you went back during opera season, what does your day look like? What time do you start? And then give me 24 hours until you turn out the lights at night. What does that actually look like?
So the always the easy way to answer that question is that there's no day that is predictable and there's just so much that's going on. But let me try to give you a sense of framework. So the days during the opera season, Cincinnati Opera is a festival format, festival format company. So that means that we're performing in the months of June and July, and then the rest of the year, aside from some community programs that we do, we're preparing for the big season. And during the season, it is late nights and early mornings, and it is an intense period. My schedule usually is, I always drop my daughter off at school during the school year, and so I'm not doing that. But I do get up, and as we talked the last time, I get on the treadmill, and I'll make my way to downtown Cincinnati to Music Hall, and from that point, it is I always think of the opera business as a people business. It's people performing on stage and performing in the orchestra pit and working backstage and moving scenery and designing sets and applying makeup and creating marketing materials and doing fundraising work. This is all people are doing these things. We don't have a whole lot of machines in the opera world. And so when you're working with a lot of people and a diverse group of people as well, an awesome group of people, that means that you're doing a lot of communication. Communication is super, super important, whether that's emails or meetings or presentations. So the days are filled with a lot of teamwork, a lot of interaction. So we may have as many as 3 or 4 meetings a day about various topics throughout the afternoon, the late morning, and then afternoon, and sometimes into the evening. There are rehearsals throughout the season, and sometimes master classes and sometimes auditions. I don't attend all of those by any means. I try to make as many of those as I can to stay in touch with the product. But it continues to be a lot of things to orchestrate and coordinate and understand and make decisions about.
Just so amazing to me. And what I'm hearing that, again, if I just think about leadership in general, and I think about a products and services, everyone's in products or services, and people.
Just a word about the different constituent groups. Yeah. So at the opera, we welcome everybody. We welcome students who may be seeing opera for the first time. We welcome people who are longtime opera goers, people who are visiting Cincinnati, people who are living in Cincinnati, agents, artists, families. It's a wide range of folks who make their way to the opera, and it's the obvious things. We want them to feel welcome and safe and ready to enjoy a transcendent kind of experience.
And I have to just jump in here and say, how do you take that and make it more accessible? And that's one of the things I really want to talk on because, as you said, you have your season. And when you're not in that season, you're trying to figure out ways to have other people experience something that they have a mindset, possibly negative, of what opera is. And oftentimes it's a misunderstanding of the art form, and it's because they've never really even seen it or heard it before. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the ways that you have creatively, as a marketing mind, really brought the opera to the community. And I want to start with something that you came up with when it first started, and that was Opera Idol. Tell us, what is Opera Idol, Chris, and where in the world did that come from?
Opera Idol was a program that we did around 2009 through 2011, and it was our saying to the community, we want to hear your voice. What we recognize is that there are many people love to sing, many people love to perform, and we have an amazing team at the opera of folks who are experts in voice. And we thought, on the one hand, well, we have something to offer to the community to give some encouragement or assessment or guidance, connecting to resources for folks in the community who are singers. And we also thought there's a significant opportunity to tell a story about opera, about singing, and about classical singing, and how it's not necessarily always that it's an extraordinary soprano from Italy who's coming to sing a performance, but sometimes there's talent to be discovered right next door. We were inspired, of course, by American Idol, and so we said, what if we had a competition that allowed folks who were not professional singers, and I think the stipulation was you cannot have had a professional contract or a contract to sing for 25 years. So that put a lot of our friends, a lot of the folks who were, part of the professional singing world, were not eligible for this particular competition. Our first year we saw, I think it was nearly 200 singers, and from that came some really amazing stories. And I remember one contestant who she had to restart, I think 3 times, and each time the judges said, "That's okay, just take a breath and begin again." I think some folks presume that because the art form is so technically demanding, you need to learn languages, you need to have an exceptional vocal range, you need to have a range in volume that allows you to be heard over a 60-piece orchestra in a 2,500-seat venue. It's such a demanding art form that there is a reputation that that's not necessarily an encouraging environment. It is a super encouraging environment. What we know is that our artists, whether they're chorus members or whether they're solo artists, they need support. They need a professional environment that allows them to do their best. We took that same kind of thinking into these auditions, and so the judges were encouraging to the young lady I was mentioning, who restarted 3 times. And they said to her afterwards, "So tell us what brought you here today?" And she said, "Well, I want to be able to say at the Thanksgiving table, this year I'm thankful that I auditioned for Cincinnati Opera. Right? Just an amazing moment. And there are so many other great stories. There's one that comes to mind with regard to a particular now professional singer. This was a fella he was in his, I think maybe he was 40 or something like that. And he'd gone to conservatory and it just never happened. It had just never happened. A career never happened for him. And so he was doing IT work up in Columbus. And his wife saw the announcement and said, you know what? Maybe you should give it one more try. Just give it one more try. Just go down. And sure enough, he sang. We were absolutely stunned by the quality of his voice and singing. And he became one of the finalists for the competition. He went on. I saw him subsequent to that at the Dayton Opera, singing in the Dayton Opera Chorus.
Wow.
And found that I asked him, I said, so, how much of this had to do, at that point when I was chatting with him, had engagements down in Florida and some other things cooking as well. And I said, well, how much of this had to do with this little opera idol competition we did? He said, how much? All of it. It wouldn't have happened if it weren't for this competition. So it's a way in which we as an organization are giving back to the community, and we believe that opera changes lives. We were talking a little bit earlier about this thought that it can be difficult for some people to think that they might enjoy opera. There are preconceived notions, as we were saying. We just released our 2020 season brochure. It's our 100th anniversary. And on the inside cover, it has this statement. It says, who can enjoy opera? Anyone.
Yes.
Who should get the chance? Everyone. Right? So it's our belief that if we are able to point at the right moments in the opera repertoire and the opera performance experience, whether that is the last page, as I think of it, of Nessun Dorma from Turandot, or whether it is the duet from La Bohème that closes the first act, or the final scene in Traviata that just sort of rips your heart out. These are the top of the roller coaster moments. And my belief is that if we share those in the right way, then people will see, I think there's something there that really spoke to me in a profound way. It's never going to be not everyone is going to love it, right? But we want everyone to have the chance. And whether that's, a person who's highly educated and in an exceptional professional career, or whether that's someone who, lives across the street from music hall, we want to have that opportunity for them to engage with the art form and experience those top of the roller coaster moments.
And what's so interesting for me is that a lot of people say that, and then they go back to their desk and keep working. A lot of people think that, and they go, but we can't really reach out to the community. A lot of people have a brand or a product, and they think about how, wow, if everyone tasted this, if everyone ate this, they would love it, but they don't do anything about it. And they just keep serving the 7 people that love their brand, or the 7,000 or whatever it is. And this is why I wanted you on the program, because you didn't just think that. You said, wow, if only there was a way for us to take the opera to them, which is crazy speak. I mean, there's how can you do that? You can't take the opera to them. But you did, and you did it very uniquely. And this is the marketing side of you, and the way to reach people, because you love the art form so much, that's obvious by listening, that you got away from your desk and you got into the community. Tell us what that's called, and tell us, how did you accomplish that?
A couple years ago, Opera America, which is the national service organization for opera, put out a challenge to the industry that said, we challenge you to create innovative ways to promote the art form, to further the art form. And so we submitted a proposal, and our inspiration for that particular project was the question, what if we removed all the barriers, right? What if we took away the perception and sometimes issue with regard to price, with regard to geographic accessibility. What if we remove the issue of, oh, I can't sit through a performance that's 3 hours long. What if we did all of that? What would that look like? And then how could we achieve it? And so we said, okay, well, we need to make it free. We need to take our art form to the community, out from music hall and out into the suburbs or a rural area or a neighborhood that's remote from music hall. And then what if we also made it not 3 hours long, but 15 minutes long, literally 15 minutes long, and shared like I was saying earlier, these top of the roller coaster moments. That was a crazy discussion, but it led us to something that is now called the Opera Express. And this is one of a kind endeavor in the industry. It is a truck that converts into a theater. So it is technically a mobile opera theater. It's a 28-foot box truck that we can drive to any location. There are 2 onboard generators that allow us to do both climate control and then have theatrical lighting in the space. We park the truck, we pop it open. There are stairs that come out, and our guests enter the truck. They take a seat there, and inside it's kind of like a black box theater with a curtain on one side and seating on the other side. And we close the doors and the lights go down, and then the magic begins. And so they see, to recorded accompaniment, 3 live singers, 3 professional opera singers performing excerpts from really some of the great operas. So O mio Babbino Caro from Gianni Schicchi, and the Pearl Fishers duet, and excerpts from La Traviata as well, and The Barber of Seville. These great moments that are all tied together through with a story that's told by the singers. They trade off the role of narrator, telling the story of how an opera begins with an audition and ends with a fully staged and costumed performance.
So that sounds amazing. I know it is amazing. I've seen it. But the thing that I really want to push out to our listeners is you and I can sit down and have a conversation. You and your team can sit down and have a conversation. Everyone listening can sit down and have a conversation and come up with, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we did something like, I don't know, there used to be like a mobile reading truck that would go to schools.
That's right.
And it had books in it, and a bookmobile, it was called. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be cool if we could do that, but it was opera? That's one thing, but having it show up in the driveway as a finished product, that journey is a whole different thing. So there are a lot of starters, and there's a lot of people, a lot of great ideas, but they're not executors. And they don't go and say, okay, so Curtis, what I'm doing this weekend is I'm going and looking at all different kinds of mobile devices and all different kinds of other people that did, what is it, the Oscar Mayer Wiener Mobile. And I have to look at everything to come up with the way we're going to, is it a van? Is it a, one of those things, you have to go and do a deep dive and then find out pricing and then find out what's it going to cost to, is it going to be too hot? Where are the performers going to go when they're not singing? There's a million logistical things. So paint us, in 2 minutes, give us that journey from, okay, we're going to do it and we're going to submit for this challenge. And how did you get it from the thought idea to executable? It's outside, go check it out.
Yeah, it's such a great point. Here's the phrase, and I think it's Steve Jobs who said this, and it both inspires me and haunts me as well. It's this statement: real artists ship. Which is to say, as you're suggesting, that many people have many great ideas, but none of those ideas matter. You're not a, quote, real artist until you actually deliver the product. And so you're right. It only matters to the degree to which lots of people dream, but how many people realize those dreams?
And how So you used to drive semi trucks, right? So you knew all about them. You knew everything about the ins and outs.
That's right.
All I'm saying is what you had to learn.
Right, sure.
Tell me a little bit of that journey, because I'm guessing you didn't know a lot about driving an 18-wheeler.
That's certainly true. Which leads me to my other thought, which is that the only way that that I know that you can achieve these extraordinary visions is to have an extraordinary team. And that's exactly what we have at the opera. And it's a mix, and we don't talk about this enough, I think, in terms of team building or team creation or staffing and hiring, which is you need a mix of people who are dreamers and doers. And it's the doers that make anything happen, and the dreamers that help to point the organization in the right way with the right projects. And so any effective team needs to have the people who ask the buy, when, so, what, who's going to do that kind of questions. And we have a number of folks who are just amazing at getting things done and putting things onto a schedule. And so that's how this project actually got off the ground. It's one thing to dream it and write a great proposal, and we received what was it called? Breakthrough or something like that, funding from Opera America that was that made it possible in terms of resources. And then it was a matter of, well, who's going to do what? What do we need to learn here? And the process itself did involve visiting a number of vendors who do these kind of conversions. We had our original vision, and we worked with a great design firm locally to do an artist rendering of what this would look like. Eventually, we hit upon some vehicles that were on the market that had been used by, I think it was Sony or Panasonic, to demonstrate three-dimensional televisions. And so they would go to, Best Buy or something like that, park in the parking lot, pop it open, and then demonstrate these televisions. When they were done with that campaign, they just were on the market. So there were 4, 5, 6 of these. We found one of them in Atlanta, and then we were able to take that, which had already so many of the things that we needed, and then make adaptations for our purpose. And we, re-wrapped the truck in vinyl branded Opera Express with images of singers on either side. And you'll see that around the city sometimes too. And we will show up at Whole Foods or IKEA or at an elementary school or
Taste of Cincinnati, any large events.
Yeah, I have to tell you one story. So we were at Blink recently. This is the light show that happens in, I guess that's the top of October.
Absolutely amazing event, world class. People fly in from all over the world to see it. The whole city's basically has images projected onto the buildings, and it is just, I forget how many people showed up last year. Millions. It was crazy.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
So
this was, so we had an opportunity to have the truck there, and what's always most effective for our outings is when there's a good amount of foot traffic, right? So we can say, hey, I know you just went in to get an avocado, but how about you want to experience some opera? And so we did tickets, and we had 4 or 5 performances with our singers, and we were there for a couple of nights this year. Anyway, so for both of those, you probably know Blink better than I do because I'm in the truck the whole time. And so I would introduce the performance. Our performers would, while they were singing, then I would still be in the truck, and I would be in a position that I could actually see most of the audience. And in one case, we had some students who were probably, I don't know, between 16 and 20 or something like that. And I thought, well, this will be interesting to see if they stay, if they stay with the entire performance or if they're distracted. And at one point I saw a young man, he pulled his phone out, and I thought, oh, shoot, we've lost him. He's got his phone out, and wouldn't you know it, he actually turned it horizontally and started filming.
Ugh.
Right? So not only did we not lose his engagement, but actually he was more engaged and wanted to share it probably in some way or revisit it later so that he could see it again. But yeah, so we're at all sorts of venues with this. It's our way of reaching out. As I look at my career at Cincinnati Opera, it has really been one of saying, how can we make opera more popular? How can we meet people where they are in terms of their experience with opera, and to get out more outside of music hall and share these magic moments. Our singers love it. I mean, whenever any of the singers who participated in the Opera Express or who've done another program we do called Opera Goes to Church, they tell us again and again it's so special to be in front of an audience who is maybe hearing this style of singing live for the very first time. And inevitably there's someone who comes up to them afterwards and says, I didn't know it was so great. This is amazing. Rewarding for them in a different way than spending 3 weeks in rehearsal, going on stage for performances, and being in front of a crowd that is very familiar with the art form. They're much closer to the audience, and an audience that is, like I said, sometimes experiencing it for the first time.
I am so inspired, and hearing you actually have the deliverable of that at your disposal to use to reach schools, to reach inner city, to reach whoever it is, any event. It's amazing, and I just salute you for doing that. But more importantly, taking your team on a journey into something that that's no one's job description.
Sure.
Is figuring out how to set up a semi truck into a performance space.
True.
And yet they all jump into that.
Yeah.
And I will just switch gears for a minute, and that's another hat that you have to wear, and that is when you're so entrenched. How long have you been at the opera, Cincinnati Opera? How many years?
I started in the fall of '97, so 23 years.
And when you know a brand so well and you know a product so well, we tend to just not look at it from 10,000 feet. And another hat you wear that I just encourage everyone who's listening to think of is, I know the opera so well. I know our experience so well, from buying tickets to getting there that night and parking to that. I wonder if it can be done better. And I wonder if I can invite other groups of people that maybe don't come to the opera, and how is our experience compared to them? And this leads me directly to you, not necessarily being a big Cincinnati Reds fan or a baseball fan, and nothing against Cincinnati, but a Reds fan, making a conscious choice again to get yourself uncomfortable so that when the people come to the opera, they might be more comfortable. That's the way I look at it. Tell us, what was with that, and how did you even come to that mindset of, maybe I'll go and be a Reds fan?
I think of it as starting at zero is the kind of rubric that that comes to mind for this, which is to say, I don't remember actually what the trigger was, aside from maybe happening to watch a ball game on television, or maybe it was in a conversation I'd had with a colleague, where I thought, you know what, maybe I could just decide to enjoy baseball. And I thought, well, in so many ways, that's what I've spent my professional life doing, which is trying to get people to consider deciding to enjoy something called opera. So I was familiar with the basics of baseball and had collected baseball cards when I was a kid and gone sometimes to games, but not on my own as an adult ever deciding to do that. Part of it, I suppose, came from having done a number of focus groups in my work in marketing at Cincinnati Opera, and I remember one vividly, where we said, we were exploring the question of what would get you to try opera. And so these were adults who were arts inclined, and in every other area of their lives were proactive and made decisions and advanced and moved forward. And we said, well, why do you think it is that you've never tried opera? And their response was, well, no one's invited me. right? And so
Wow.
it made me think that there is some kind of barrier there, that there is a leap that needs to be made. And what would it be like for me to experience that leap myself? And so I decided, well, let's just see what happens if I decide to start enjoying baseball, become a baseball fan. Could that happen?
That is so crazy. I love it.
Yeah. And so I started watching games. I found that my attention shifted. I wasn't aware of whether the Reds were in town or whether they were playing away games. I didn't have any perception that away games, if they were in San Francisco, maybe significantly later in the day in terms of a telecast. Small things like that, and going eventually to the ballpark and going to the window and purchasing a ticket or buying it online. And I'm mindful the whole time of thinking, are there, and am I at any point getting signals that would suggest A, this isn't for me, or B, this is too difficult for me to navigate and I need help, because that would suggest if I need help that, that there's something sort of wrong with the flow, wrong with the system.
So there are barriers built into me becoming a fan.
That's right.
And what are we doing potentially at the opera in the same way?
Exactly.
I love it. So strong.
Yeah. And it's this idea of starting at zero. So with baseball, I kind of started at zero and said, okay, well, I know there are games. How do I find out when those games are? And how do I purchase tickets? And how do I know, am I getting a good deal on the tickets? And what about like AAA has some specials, and how do I navigate all of this? And,
right. Am I sitting 40 rows up where I can hardly see the players? Or am I sitting, on the first baseline where I can see everybody's breathing and, if they spit, I see it.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing when I'm looking at the theater.
It's the same thing. That's right.
It really is. And the price differences.
I will say on reflection that one thing I'm realizing now is that I had mentors, and I think that is, and I don't, I had mentors in the sense that I would, there are a couple of folks in our box office that are big baseball fans, and so I could go and ask and say, what about this call last night in the game? Doesn't that seem like it could have been this? Or is the rule like this actually? Or what happens when, they run out of pitchers? Or why does a starting pitcher only do like so many innings? And what are closers? And so they were, and that helped me along the way, because otherwise I don't know where I would have gone if I had those questions. I just would have wondered. But so along the way there were mentors to help me, and I hope that the same is true with opera, that people feel like they can reach out and say, they have this particular question about why was this sung by a mezzo-soprano rather than a soprano? Why was, the overture was different. Why was that?
Why don't they do it in English?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, for me, as somebody at 10,000 feet, do I really want to go and sit and listen to somebody sing when I don't know the words?
Right.
Well, they don't know that right up there on stage, oftentimes.
Project a translation, just above the stage. Why aren't there microphones? Right. We don't have microphones in opera. They're trained. We perform in spaces that allow the human voice to be featured and actually to be really quite thrilling. And these singers are trained to sing in those kinds of spaces where they can
with the full orchestra. And those are the kinds of things that, again, like you saying, oh, okay, they're tied. What do you mean it's going to go another inning? What's the seventh inning stretch?
Right.
Those kinds of things. Unless you experience it, you don't understand. Wow, there's no microphones. They're just singing up there, and that's crazy. And it's, and my teeth are chattering because it's so moving.
I would say, really, for anyone doing marketing work, it is critical to experience what the patron or your customer experiences. So that means, buying the item and following the instructions that came with the item to put it together yourself, so that what it is like to sort of build the product and then use the product and start at zero every time. Because we forget how much specialized knowledge we have, and we know all the shortcuts, and we know, how to customize the experience for ourselves to make it satisfying. But if you're going in with zero knowledge and just try to put that on, and for us at the opera, that means, stay in a hotel that your patrons stay in, figure out what's their transportation, getting to music hall experience like, what's it like finding a seat, getting a program, reading the program, finding the restrooms, where do I have dinner beforehand, is there anything open afterwards, and that's to experience it from the perspective of a brand new customer is the best way, and the most efficient way, really, to find where your effort should be in improving the experience.
I love that. And in closing, I want to talk a little bit, if we could, just about all of the different skill sets you have to bring in to be able to be you, because it isn't just one thing. And one of the things that I admire about you and your leadership style is just humility. And always being a lifelong learner means you don't know everything. If I'm still learning things, that obviously then the other side of that is I don't know everything. And having that as somebody that I can communicate with makes it really safe, that they don't know everything. Right. And even though they're my boss or my boss's boss, they're a regular person. How much does that go into flowing into who you are in your leadership style? Because I look at you as a partner and somebody that wants to go and learn about everything about trucks on this journey together. I'm just going to give you that, and when you're done, come back and tell me about trucks. No, I'm going to go on the ride with you.
That's right.
What's the difference in that, and what would you say to people that are listening that are just taking on a leadership role? How do you balance that in your everyday work? Very, very important.
Yeah, I want to believe I'm always prepared to be wrong. And I think that anyone in life can teach you something that you don't know. And you should be always open to listening for that. As you mentioned, yeah, I love learning. I love reading. And it is really, we hear it all the time, the more you know, the less you know, or the less you feel like you know. And so I am sometimes overwhelmed by media, and by that I mean, I just wish I could get through all of these New Yorkers, or actually read the newspaper, or listen to all of the podcasts that I have in my queue, or Audible books. I have, as we've talked, a long commute, but what's great about that is it gives me time to pursue knowledge, and that's a wide range of topics. And I could say more about that, but I'll leave that for the moment and go to this question of humility. Opera is, I think, in the same way that many businesses are experiencing greater and greater specialization in roles. Opera is true, and maybe even more true in opera. We have people who specialize and know in detail so much about lighting, or so much about graphic design, or so much about fundraising. And no general director and CEO could ever know as much as those people. This is very different from 100 years ago, or 50 years ago even, when the head of an organization or a company would be able to do almost all of the jobs of the people who report to him or her. In this case, things are so very specialized that you have to count on your senior team and your entire staff as a whole to be excellent in their areas of expertise. and there's just no way that you can give guidance and vision, and you should do that, and you should also establish here's principles about how we treat each other, how we care for our customers, how we provide a supportive and encouraging environment for our employees and artists, and those are all things, but they're kind of, 10,000 feet or something like that. And so for me, there's always like, well, I don't really know how to do that. So it's a natural kind of humility. And I can't sell a ticket in our ticketing system. I don't know how to put together these set pieces. I can't go on stage and sing this role without preparation, just spontaneously. And that, for me, leads to a lot of humility, in the sense that there's literally so much that I can't do, and just also alongside of humility, and maybe it's the same, I don't know, maybe it's the other side of the coin, is respect too, and just a deep respect for the people who I work with and the people who are our patrons. They all have their own stories. They all have their own paths to how they got there. They all have something that's unique about them that they can offer and bring to the table. And that's top of mind for me all the time, every day. And it allows me to, be humble and operate with humility, but also to be good at listening, and I think a better decision maker too. And above all, I suppose it engenders a kind of trust that allows us to weather difficult situations, and also to ask extraordinary things of people too, who are on the same path along with me, and know that, as you said, Curtis, that I wouldn't ask them to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. And many times I'm right alongside that person making that discovery, or that journey to a new place with them.
So my big takeaway from that I want our listeners to be sure that they don't miss, is I surround myself with amazing people.
That's right.
That have worked their entire lives to be amazing at what they do. And then I allow them to do that. I give them a direction, but I don't manage them. And so many people, I feel, are just amazing artists, have these amazing gifts, but because they're so suppressed and they're so underneath the gun, they're not allowed to flourish in that way. And that means I have to be humble enough to let them take the stage, if you will, and have a moment to be in the spotlight. And it's not all about me, me, me. Right. And everyone that's listening, I think, needs to hear this, and that is, and I produce a world-class product that can stand up to any other brand in any other opera house in the world.
In the world, that's right.
So that mindset doesn't mean lesser than. That mindset's not weakness. That mindset is letting people flourish and grow where they're supposed to.
That's right.
And that's what you do so amazingly. Thank you so much for sharing some of the stories and some of the things you've done to think outside the box and to grow your people. Such an honor to have you on the show. Thank you again, Chris Milligan, CEO of the Cincinnati Opera, for joining us here today on The Next 24 Hours.
Thank you, Curtis. Great to be with you.
Wow, I cannot thank Chris Milligan enough for sharing his time and his expertise and his passion and love for the opera with us. And that's going to take us right into the 24-hour challenge. So what we're going to do is talk about, now that was great info and really great insights. How can I translate that and do something with that in the next 24 hours? It's very simple. I want you to think about your comfort zones. I want you to think about sporting events. I want you to think about TV shows you watch. I want you to think, and I want you to go and do the exact opposite. So go watch a TV show you'd never watch. Go to a restaurant where you'd never eat that kind of food. I want you to, if you've ever watched a baseball game, if you've ever been to a baseball game, I want you to make a decision that this year you're going to go to an opera. Wow. Imagine if you just tried something brand new like he did with going and experiencing baseball as a whole new thing. Last thing I would say, if you do work for a big organization, come to your office, come to the place that you do business as a brand new customer with brand new eyes so that you can bring something new and fresh to your brand and to the experience of your customer. That is the 24-hour challenge. Go do it, and I'd love to hear back from you what your experience was when you went to the opera. Have a great day, and of course, keep living the dream. Hey everybody, I wanted to thank you so much for listening, and I have a workbook that is all about script writing. It's how to write a new script. It's normally $15 on my website. I want to offer it to you today for free. Just go to curtizimmerman.com/new script, and you'll be able to download that as a free gift. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you keep listening to the next 24 hours.